My sons set my house on fire, hoping to collect the insurance money and solve all their problems. They didn't care that I'd be stranded on the street or possibly unable to escape the burning house. By the time I smelled smoke, they were already on the lawn, waving for me to get out. Their faces were pale, and their eyes were filled with fear. "Thank God you're okay, Mom," Daniel said, throwing a blanket over my shoulders, as if they didn't know better. "Old wiring," he added quickly to Incident Commander, as if he were making a diagnosis. Flames licked the kitchen window where I used to cool pies, the glass flickering orange, like a warning I should have read sooner. "Don't worry about a thing," Mark said, pushing me to the curb. "We already called the insurance company." "They'll fix you?" He glanced at his brother, then back at me. "450,000. You'll finally be safe." "There's a spare room in Maple Grove," Daniel said, as if offering a window seat rather than a locked, beige-carpeted hallway. "You'll like the entertainment." "The entertainment," I repeated, tasting the ashes. A fireman screamed, and the roof sighed, sending a shower of sparks into the night. My neighbor Helen squeezed my hand. "I saw your sons here," she whispered. "I thought they were helping you pack." She looked at the flames, then at their clean shoes. The smoke carried the smell of wet wood and ruined Sunday dinners. My wedding photo, my mother's brooch, the quilt I'd made the winter after my husband died, each memory tore and folded in the dark. Mark pulled the brochure out of his pocket, smooth and ready to use. "This is temporary until we figure it out. We'll do the paperwork." How could my own sons call prison a plan and expect me to be grateful? When did love become a ledger? Daniel's hand rested on my elbow, like a shepherd leading a lost flock. "You need a rest," he said. "No more worrying about bills or upkeep." I looked at the house, at the jagged black hole that was my bedroom, and felt something take root inside me. Not grief, not yet. Something more stable. I watched the flames reflect in their eyes and saw the calculation try on worry like a borrowed coat. They were so sure of their next steps. So sure I was small enough to fit in. They didn't know about the cloud backup, or Helen's CCTV, or the voicemail Mark had left on the wrong phone. I'd moved documents. They had no idea I was ready for this night. The fire was hissing, Incident Commander was barking orders, and my sons were rehearsing their pity. But if you want to understand how we got to the curb at midnight with ashes on our slippers and a nursing home brochure in our laps, I have to go back to the beginning. After my husband Thomas died, people brought covered plates and advice. The food was healthy, the advice was not. I learned quickly that grief makes you a project in the eyes of others. "You don't have to be alone," my son Mark said, carrying a box of folders to the dining room table as if he were saving me from a flood. Daniel came in with a label maker and a look. "We'll set up systems," he said. "Automation, the bills pay themselves now." It sounded friendly. It was effective. Plus, for the first time, my home didn't feel like my own. At first they were cautious. They sat on the edge of my routine like birds on a fence, chirping suggestions. "Maybe put the spare keys in the safe," Mark said. "I'll hold on to the set." Daniel thought my will needed a modern update. He knew someone. They had a brochure for Maple Grove, just to look at. They liked the security gates, the neat lawns, the way the staff called out names in hushed tones. It should have been a warning sign to me, how they loved doors that locked from the outside. I noticed the little things. My mail started arriving late or already opened. Daniel moved my pill organizer to a visible place, which turned out to be behind the microwave. Mark fixed the smoke alarms after they started beeping one night, but the next week I couldn't reach the ladder to check them. When I told him I liked to sleep with the window open, he nodded and, without asking, screwed a child-proof latch onto it. "To feel safe," he said. You can open it 3 inches. 3 inches is not air, it is control disguised as care. Some nights I lay awake and counted the habits that kept me steady. Write dates on the calendar in red pen, use cash for groceries, unplug the kettle after breakfast, water the fern on Tuesdays, call Helen across the street each Wednesday at 4. Ordinary chains that held me in place. I started to keep another list, this one in my head. Times the boys corrected me on details I knew were true. Times they forgot their concern and said the quiet parts. If this place sells for $4.50, Mark texted Daniel one afternoon, thinking he'd sent the message to someone else, we can finally breathe. He forwarded it to me by mistake. When I asked what $4.50 meant, he laughed. Calories in that muffin, Mom. I made tea, shook my fingers over the steam, and wrote the date and time on a sticky note. Forwarded message. $4.50. Muffin lie. I found my own helpers. The man Thomas trusted, Mr. Hart had retired, so I went to a new lawyer, Miss Patel, a woman with weathered hands and a laugh that sounded like a door opening. I told her everything in plain words, not the kind that make trouble look polite. I told her I feared not loneliness, but erasure. She listened with the stillness of a doctor listening to a heart. We'll set some things in place, she said. No changes to your house or accounts without your explicit signature. New power of attorney. Springing, not durable. An independent fiduciary if you become unable. Not your son's. I didn't want to think about that day, but I signed anyway, and the pen felt heavy, like a tool and a weapon both. Miss Patel sealed the documents and gave me copies. Keep one where you can show it quickly, she said. Keep one where no one will look. I placed the first copy by my phone. The second I slid into a hollow I knew in the back panel of the old armoire behind my winter sweaters. Thomas had hidden Christmas jewelry there for years, and we never told anyone, because we liked having a secret. Then the pills began. New supplements, my daughter-in-law Lydia said, smiling too hard. Brain support. My mom swears by them. She shook 2 into my hand. They were chalky, unmarked. I turned them in the light. You first, I said. She laughed, pretended she hadn't heard, and stirred my tea for me. That night, I held one tablet under my tongue until she left the room, then spit it into a napkin and tucked it into an envelope. The next morning, I took the envelope to the pharmacist at the small store I trust. He squinted at the tablets, frowned, and told me they looked like a strong antihistamine brand that made people drowsy. You want me to send them to the lab? He asked. Quietly, I said. The next week, Daniel took me for a drive that ended at the memory center. They had an opening, he said, parking in a handicapped spot because it's quicker. In the waiting room, he filled out forms for me and answered the nurse's questions with a speed that made me dizzy. She's been leaving burners on, he said. She lost her way home last month. I opened my mouth and then closed it. Lying is easier when you practice. I waited until the neuropsychologist called my name, then asked sweetly to use the restroom. In the stall, I pulled out a small bottle of lemon oil I keep for my cuticles. I rubbed it under my nose until it burned. When the test began, my eyes watered and my head cleared like a bell. I said the right words. I drew the right clock. I named animals until the doctor held up his hands and laughed. We'll be sending a letter to your primary physician, he said, and your son's. I smiled. Would you be sure to send me a copy? He nodded. Of course. On the way out, we passed a bulletin board of services for families. One flyer was for a support group called Caregivers in Crisis. Another was for a lawyer who specialized in elder fraud. I took both. I started keeping duplicates of everything. Bank statements in a folder in my bedroom, the same statements scanned and saved to a cloud account whose password I wrote twice. once in my head, once on a card tucked inside my Bible. I photographed my jewelry and tucked the real pieces into a safe deposit box that Helen rented in her name for me, because she was the kind of neighbor who'd drive you to the airport at 4 a.m. and not tell anyone. "Are you sure?" she asked as we left the bank that day. "I don't like seeing you look over your shoulder." "I'm not looking over," I said. "I'm looking ahead." "Then you're more prepared than I was," she murmured, her eyes flicking to a place I couldn't see. In early spring, a man from an electrical company knocked on my door. "Your son called us," he said. "Said you needed a full inspection for insurance." He wore a clean uniform and old hands. I liked him instantly. While he worked, I made him lunch. He tested circuits, tightened breakers, replaced 2 worn outlets, and wrote a report in careful block letters. "Your wiring's fine," he told me, and left a copy on the counter. I photographed it. I put 1 copy in my kitchen drawer and another in the hollow behind the armoire. I emailed the third to myself with the subject: "Old house, solid." A week later, I came home from the grocery store to find Mark in my kitchen, the back door deadbolt slid. He held up a key. "Spare," he said, as if the word excused everything. "You left the door open." "I left it unlocked because you were coming," I said, "and because this neighborhood knows me." "Neighborhoods don't keep out scammers," he snapped. "We're trying to help." He showed me a list on his phone: estate sale companies, home stagers, Maple Grove move-in dates. "We can list your place in June," he said, and something about the confidence in his voice narrowed the world to a point. I asked where I would be between June and whenever they got me settled. "With us," he said. "Or at Maple for a few weeks." "It's all arranged." "Arranged with whom?" "With people who know how to do this." I wanted to tell him I had done harder things in my life than change an address. I wanted to ask him when he decided my choices were a problem to be solved. Instead, I said, "Let me see the papers." He hesitated and then handed me a folder. Inside were copies of my will, except it wasn't my will, and consents to share my medical information, except the signature wasn't mine. My name bent strangely. The J leaned like it was tired. "Where did you get these?" I asked. He smiled in the shape of a lie. "You signed them last month, at Miss Patel's." "No," I said, and set them down very gently. "No, I did not." He blinked. "You probably forgot." I did not forget. I remembered his birthday boy face the first time he lied over a broken lamp and thought he could charm me. I remembered Thomas telling him, "Apologize with words and with action," and how Mark had learned to do the first one and not the second. I remembered to breathe. "Take your folder," I said, and pointed to the door. "And don't come into my house without knocking again." His mouth hardened. "We'll see what the lawyer says," he muttered, and left so fast the screen door rattled. I called Miss Patel. She told me to bring the papers immediately. Her office smelled like lemon oil and ink. She studied the signatures and pulled out the copies she had on file. "Not yours," she said, tapping the false strokes. "It's a good attempt, but not yours." "What do I do?" "You keep living," she said. "I handle the documents. And if anyone attempts to use these, you call the police." That night, I locked the doors and placed a chair under my bedroom handle. It wasn't fear. It was containment. If someone wanted to take something, they would have to take it from me directly. In May, at a barbecue in Daniel's yard, my granddaughter Emma slipped her hand into mine. "Grandma," she whispered, "Mom says you should take her new vitamins at night." "Don't?" Her eyes were big. They made Aunt June sleepy before her test. "Thank you," I said, my heart snagging. "You're very wise." "I saw Mommy put them in your pill box," she confessed. And then, as children do, ran to the trampoline as if she had not just changed the course of my year. 2 days later, the pharmacist called. "Your tablets," he said. "Diphenhydramine. Big dose. Explains the fog. Hard to think clearly, even the day after. Thank you," I said, and hung up with my jaw tight. When Lydia visited that afternoon, I smiled and told her I'd started the vitamins. "I feel a bit out of it," I added. "We'll see." She took it as a victory and brought me chamomile tea. Sometimes the fastest way to the truth is to let a lie believe it is winning. The first voicemail came in June. I had turned my phone to vibrate because I was weeding the side garden and didn't want to jump at every noise. When I came inside, the red light blinked. I pressed play. "It's me," Mark's voice said, impatient. "We're good. Policy is $450. They'll cut the check fast if electrical's the story. Don't mention the inspection. We'll frame it as aging systems. And Mom will be out while we do the work. So, smooth." He hung up without saying who the "we" was. I played it 3 times, then saved it to 2 places and emailed it to Ms. Patel with the subject. Mark's plans. I began to move the irreplaceables. Thomas's letters went into a fireproof pouch Helen locked in her safe. The quilt from our first winter went into a bag labeled spare sheets and tucked under her guest bed. The photographs I couldn't stand to lose. I scanned and uploaded at the library because the connection was better there, and people with real needs didn't ask questions. The librarian, a woman my age with uncommon kindness, asked if I was making a project. "Yes," I said. "A small one." I also tested my doors. The back bolt stuck sometimes in humid weather. I had Eugene, the electrician, come back and plan the edge of the door and replace the hardware. "Good as new," he said. "Better." "Could you show me how to test the alarms?" I asked. He did. We stood together on the porch while the house screamed and then quieted. Eugene gave me a nod that felt like respect. "You've got good bones here," he said, palm against the siding. "Worth protecting." In late July, Daniel asked me to spend a weekend at his place. "The painters can do the ceiling in your hallway then," he said. 2 days. "You'll like it here, Mom." "I will," I said. "But I'm not going." He frowned. "You can't keep saying no." "Watch me," I said gently. That Friday, at dusk, a car slowed in front of my house. I lifted the lace at the parlor window. Mark and Daniel stepped out. Daniel carried a backpack. Mark had a box. They didn't look up. They walked to the side gate where the cans are. The neighbor's dog barked once, warning and weary, and then stopped. I moved away from the window and went to my bedroom like a person walking toward a wave instead of away. The air felt heavy. I opened the bedroom window the permitted 3 inches and closed it again. Then I picked up my phone and texted Helen. "Boys here, side gate. Keep inside." She replied in 1 word, "Watching." I could have gone next door. I could have called the police then. Instead, I did what I have done my whole life. I waited and listened. The back door clicked softly. The floor groaned as it always does when 2 adult men forget there is a house listening. The scent rode in second, sweet and wrong. Accelerant. I learned that word later, but my body believed it first. I moved toward the front door. "Mom," Mark called, voice bright and false. "Just dropping off supplies." I unlocked the front and walked onto the porch. The night pressed on my skin. My hands were steady. I took 1 breath, then another. Behind me, somewhere in the kitchen, something whispered. A match. A sound like paper deciding it was a flame. I fixed my gaze on Helen's porch light. It flashed twice. She was there. Inside my house, the sound grew. Someone, Daniel, I think, opened the back door with quick steps, then the front, and the draft drew the fire forward like a held breath released. I stood to one side as heat unfurled down the hallway and found air. The smoke alarm wailed. Mark burst onto the porch with a face already formed into horror. "Mom, are you okay?" Behind him, Daniel dialed his phone. "Electrical," he shouted to the night, for the benefit of whoever would hear. "Old wiring." The rest you know. The engines, the blanket around my shoulders, the brochure for Maple Grove, the pity rehearsal, the smell of my past turning to salt and steam. But what you don't know is what I did next. I went home with Helen, showered the smoke out of my hair, and put my clothes in a bag. We sat at her kitchen table with the bag between us like evidence in a courtroom. She poured me a glass of water and waited until I could swallow without shaking. Then I called Miss Patel and left a message that began with 3 words that tasted like iron. They did it. At dawn, while the house still smoldered, a man in a windbreaker with fire marshal on the back walked the perimeter with a clipboard. His name was Reed. He had a face that had seen worse. I stood on the curb and told him about the inspection, my son's visit, the smell. I told him I had neighbors who had cameras and eyes. He didn't nod or frown. He wrote, "We'll do our work," he said. "You do yours. Don't touch what's left. Don't speak to insurance without counsel. And don't contact your sons except through your attorney." "I'm their mother," I said, and the word mother cracked in the air like a dish dropped on tile. "I know," he said, not unkind. "Be a witness right now." I called Miss Patel from Helen's spare room. "Bring your bag of clothes," she said. "Bring your phone. Bring yourself." In her office, she took my bag with gloved hands and sealed it. "They'll want to test for accelerants," she explained. "We'll give them yours." She asked me to tell her everything again, slowly, stopping me when I began to speed past parts that hurt. When I finished, she patted the pile of documents between us. "You did well," she said. "Now we call 3 people. Your insurer, a public adjuster, and a private investigator." The insurer put me on hold long enough to know it was deliberate. When they came on, I said I wanted to flag potential fraud. "On whose part?" the woman asked, bored. "Not mine," I said. "I believe family members may be involved." Miss Patel lifted her chin, approving. "We'll assign a special investigator," the woman said, and gave me a case number that felt like the opposite of a name. The public adjuster, a soft-voiced woman named Corinne, promised to meet me at the site and represent only my interests. "The company will try to minimize," she said. "That's their job. Mine is to make you whole." The words sounded like magic. I tried not to believe in magic. The private investigator, a retired detective named Abrams who ate pistachios from his pocket and wore shoes that had known rain, took my phone and Helen's security footage. "A lot of folks think arson is a clean thing," he said. "It isn't. It leaves tracks in everything. Finances, cameras, timelines." He smiled at my neighbor's porch light video. "These new doorbells are nosy." Blessum Abrams found the first thread in 2 days, a receipt for fuel canisters at a hardware store near Daniel's office, time-stamped an hour before the fire. He found the second thread in my bank statements, a debit to Maple Grove for a reservation fee, signed with my name, in Lydia's hand. He found the third in a text Daniel sent to Mark after midnight that I would never unhear. "We're in it now." The fire marshal called a week later with a voice that gave nothing away. "Patterns consistent with accelerant pour," he said. "Multiple points of origin in the kitchen. Not electrical. We're forwarding to the state arson unit." "Does that mean—" "It means what it means," he said. "The case is moving." Daniel called the next morning. I let it go to voicemail. "Mom," he said, "it's gotten out of hand. There's a misunderstanding. Don't talk to strangers. We'll get you set up at Maple temporarily. It'll be easier for everyone. Everyone. Such a wide word. Such a small heart inside it. I saved the message and sent it to Miss Patel. She drafted a letter to my sons that began, "All communications with our client should be directed to our office." It was a dam built in a day. The water hissed behind it. Maple Grove sent me a letter that referenced a conversation I did not remember having. "We are delighted to welcome you to our community," it said. "As discussed with your family, we have reserved the Oak Suite." There was a number at the bottom, an amount I apparently owed. Miss Patel sent back a response with the receipts from my bank and a simple question. "On what authority did you accept funds from a third party for a resident not under guardianship?" Maple Grove's lawyer called to say it was a misunderstanding. Miss Patel replied with another question. "Would you prefer to address it with the licensing board or the newspaper?" They refunded the reservation within the hour and mailed an apology I did not read to the end. Reed, the fire marshal, met me at the site the day the caution tape came down. We wore hard hats and stepped around the bones of my life. The kitchen was a black mouth. The hall was a throat with soot for skin. "It's not safe to linger," he said, and then crouched near the baseboards and pointed to a place where the pattern looked like flowers. "We call these poor patterns. It's ugly poetry." He led me outside again. "We have enough to move forward, and with your neighbor's footage and your investigator's work, the prosecutor will be interested." Interested. Another word that can be promise or threat. Abrams wanted me to bait my sons into careless words. "No contact," Ms. Patel reminded him. "We can use what we have." But life has a way of bringing contact to you even when you lock your doors. Mark showed up at Helen's gate the next afternoon, chest out. "I'm here to see my mother," he told her through the mesh like a man making a scene for an invisible audience. "You can watch from the porch." "She doesn't live here," Helen said, "and she isn't seeing visitors." "Who are you? The warden?" "I'm the neighbor," Helen said, and closed the door gently. That night I called Daniel. "I know Miss Patel would scold me, but I wanted to hear which son would break first." He answered on the second ring. "Mom, thank God," he said, relief flooding his voice so fast it sounded practiced. "I've been worried sick." "Have you?" I said. "They're asking questions," he blurted. "Don't answer them without me." "I have a lawyer," I said. "You have your own." "Mom, this has gone too far. You lit my house." He made a noise like choking. "We did not," he said. He switched to soft words. "We were trying to keep you safe. The house was fine. Old wiring, I have the inspection." He swore under his breath, and there it was. The crack. "It was Mark's idea," he said. "He pushed. I wanted you to move, that's all. The insurance—" He stopped. "The insurance," I repeated. Silence. In it, I could feel two sons. The boy who used to cry when he lost a marble, and the man who could plan a crime to avoid admitting he was drowning in a mortgage he couldn't afford. "We'll talk," he said finally. "Just us." "Have your lawyer call mine," I said, and ended the call before my voice could be persuaded by the ghost of his childhood. The detectives came the next morning with 2 warrants. Lydia called me from an unknown number at lunchtime. She skipped greetings. "Do you know what you're doing?" she hissed. "You're destroying your family." "You started that," I said, "with your vitamins." She laughed, a sound like glass in a garbage disposal. "Prove it." "I already did," I said, "and I have your signature at Maple Grove." "How did that feel, signing my name?" "It felt like the right thing," she said. "You need to be taken care of." "Not by thieves." The phone clicked dead. In August, a man from the prosecutor's office met me in a quiet room with too many flags. He explained charges in words that sounded like stones sliding into a bag. Arson, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, elder financial exploitation. A social worker sat in the corner. She looked at me the way people look at puppies in cages, with pity that makes your back straighten. "You will be asked to testify," the prosecutor said. "I will," I said, and folded my hands so he wouldn't see them shake. I expected Mark to bluster. He did. He hired a loud lawyer who appeared on television. Daniel surprised me. He arrived with a quiet man in a gray suit and eyes that wrote everything down. Within a week, they asked to discuss a plea. "Your son wishes to cooperate," the prosecutor said. "If his information corroborates our evidence, we'll consider a lesser charge." I didn't know whether to weep or applaud. Instead, I went home to Helen's and watered her fern as if it were my own. In the middle of all this, life continued to do what life does. Bills arrived. Corinne tracked every spoon and scorched plate and made a list you could have used to build me again. And Reed returned to the site with a group of trainees who looked at my blackened dining room as if it were a classroom. A bird nested in the eaves and then thought better of it, moving to the pine tree 2 houses down. The insurance company tried to deny part of my claim because the loss involved family misconduct. Miss Patel sent them a letter with case law and the phrase "not attributable" to the insured in bold. They paid. I moved into a small furnished apartment near the library while we waited. The kitchen fit 1 person and a kettle. The windows opened all the way. I slept the first week with my wallet under my pillow, and the second with it in the drawer, and the third with it on the counter like an ordinary person. The day the county arraigned my sons, I bought a new dress that didn't look like an apology. Courtrooms flatten everyone. The judge looked bored until he didn't. Lydia sat behind Mark and wore a cardigan the color of mint leaves, as if to say she believed in fresh starts. Emma sat between her parents and stared at her shoes. When the clerk read the charges, Mark's mouth pursed. Daniel did not look at me. When the judge asked for pleas, Mark said, "Not guilty," as if the words were a trick and we were all playing along. Daniel cleared his throat. "Guilty on counts 2 and 3, he said softly. The room inhaled at once. Mark whipped his head toward his brother as if the real betrayal had just happened in front of his eyes. I thought of the night in their room, when they were small and marked the floor with tape so each would have his side, and then stepped over it 1,000 times. It took months for the machine of justice to grind through. In that time, I learned a new version of patience, one that didn't mean passivity, but endurance. Corinne found me a rental house with wide doors and a yard so I could plant the lilacs I had cut from stumps. She negotiated with the insurer without raising her voice and won me enough to rebuild without debt. Miss Patel set up a trust that would prevent anyone from ever changing my fate with a signature that wasn't mine. She explained the difference between forgiveness and permission. Abrams brought me a photograph from a security camera at the hardware store of my sons, laughing in a way that made my stomach twist. "You don't need to see this," he said. "I do," I said, and I did. Then I asked him for a photograph of Helen's porch light the same night. He found it, a small square of yellow in a frame of dark. I kept that one. When the day came for the plea hearing, Daniel stood, hands folded. His lawyer explained cooperation, the hardware store purchase, the plan to create a scenario consistent with faulty wiring, the way Mark had mapped it out to the minute. He described the accelerant they used. He described the window latch. He described the way they had debated whether to make sure I was home or not because, his voice broke here, they believed fear would make me compliant afterward. I sat very still. I tried not to picture the versions of that night that ended differently. I failed. Then I breathed. The judge accepted Daniel's plea. He faced a shorter sentence and restitution. He turned to me in the aisle. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, and for a second I saw the boy who had cried over a broken marble. I nodded. I did not absolve him in public. Some sacraments are private. Mark refused any deal. He wanted a trial. His lawyer made stories for the jury. He called me confused, and then he called me calculating. He held up the inspection report and called it irrelevant. He held up Helen's footage and called it inconclusive. He called Lydia to the stand. She cried. The prosecutor asked her about the pills. She said she believed in herbal support. He showed her the lab report. She said she had never seen such a thing. He showed her the Maple Grove documents and her signature that curled in her unique way. She called it help. He called it forgery. The jurors watched her the way people watch waves right before they change. They convicted Mark on all counts. At the sentencing, they asked if I wanted to speak. I stood at the podium and put both hands on the wood. I am 72 years old, I said. I have loved my sons their entire lives. I raised them with a man who believed in saying you're sorry with your mouth and your hands. One of my sons forgot both. The other remembered one. I have learned that love does not mean letting someone burn your life to the ground and call it safety. I asked the court to remember that the person whose safety was used as a reason to harm was me, and I ask for a sentence that tells other sons and daughters that if they try this, the law will see them. The judge nodded like a person who had decided something days ago. He sentenced Mark to prison and Lydia to probation for her part, banned from touching my finances again. He ordered restitution to rebuild what could be rebuilt. He looked at Daniel and said 2 words I had not expected from him. Do better. I walked out into a September that smelled like a beginning. Outside, Emma ran to me and wrapped her arms around my waist. Grandma, she said into my coat, can I stay with you sometimes? I like your quiet. You can stay often, I said, understanding that we were writing a new thing between us that would not be defined by the ruins behind us. I rebuilt, but not the same. The new house has 1 story, wide thresholds, fire sprinklers, and windows that open as far as I choose. In the kitchen, the counter is lower so my wrists do not ache kneading dough. There is a drawer labeled tools, with nothing in it but tools. On the wall is Eugene's inspection framed like art, because I like to see things that hold up. The quilt hangs over the couch. The letters from Thomas sit in a wooden box that is not hidden because I am done with hiding the best parts of my life. I visit Helen every morning. We play a game where we drink coffee and say 1 thing we're glad we did and 1 thing we're glad we didn't. I'm glad I put the papers in the armoire, I say. I'm glad I didn't take the vitamins, she says. We laugh like people who have earned it. Some days I get mail from strangers who read a short article. A small paper wrote about a grandmother who helped put her sons in prison. Some ask me if I regret it. I walk to the lilacs and think about the smell of a house turning to steam. I think about Emma's small hand and the way she said, "Don't." I think about how many women in this town have told me that someone tried to make their choices for them in the name of concern. I do not regret. I ache sometimes. Those are different. Daniel writes me letters. He tells me sobriety is hard. He tells me he's learning basic carpentry in a program that makes benches for parks. He asks if he can see me when he is out. I write back with conditions: honesty, counseling, proof of work, and a meeting in Ms. Patel's office first. I let him know that regret is not the same as repair. He surprises me with the dignity to agree. Mark does not write. When he gets out, he will be a man with a long list of things to repair and a short list of people willing to help him repair them. I am not one of them. Love does not stop, but doors can. On the anniversary of the fire, I stood on the sidewalk where I had watched my past crackle and fold. The new house glowed like an apology done right, bright, simple, without flourishes. I sprinkled a little water on the ground for the things that could not be rebuilt. I tucked a note into the earth that said thank you, beside a note that said, never again. Then I went inside, put the kettle on, and opened the windows as wide as I wanted. If you want to know how it all happened, how a woman can lose everything and still fit her life back together without handing the scissors to the people who cut it, this is the part I didn't tell the court. I never stopped believing I was the person most qualified to make decisions about me. I learned to be gentle with my heart and unsentimental with my records. I learned that a plan made quietly and in good light can outlast a plan made in darkness and smoke. A week later, the prosecutor called to tell me the restitution check had arrived. It won't bring things back, he said. No, I said, but it will buy Emma a piano. It did. When she played the first halting notes in my living room, I thought of all the ways people try to decide what you need and all the ways you can decide it yourself. Her fingers found a melody. She looked up. Is it okay if I practice every day? It's more than okay, I said, and we began again. I keep the Maple Grove brochure in a drawer, not because I'll ever go there. If I need a place one day, I'll choose it myself, but because it reminds me what a lie looks like when it's glossy. I keep the inspection on the wall because it reminds me what truth looks like when it's tested. I keep Helen's porch light bulb in a box like a trophy, because that light meant I was not alone. From time to time, women my age sit at my table and tell me their versions of my story. A son who says the bank is too complicated. A daughter who wants the keys and calls it love. We write names of lawyers on napkins. We say our ages out loud so they sound like power, not expiration dates. We practice sentences into our coffee cups so they fit our mouths when we need them. No. My lawyer will call you. I'll keep my keys. This is my house. We do not whisper. On the second anniversary, I received a small package with no return address. Inside was a photograph of a park bench with a brass plaque for the woman who always let me sit next to her. The handwriting on the back was Daniel's. I put it on my mantel next to the framed inspection, not because my sons deserve a place there, but because proof of change does. People are made of oak and smoke, both. I hope his bench holds. I hope his hands learn what the right kind of work feels like. And if you wonder whether I ever wait for the other shoe to drop, I will tell you what I told the detective the day he closed the case. Shoes are for walking away from the people who light fires and toward the ones who will stand with you while you put them out. I walk every morning along the street where my house once opened its windows, only 3 inches. I breathe deep. Do I miss the old kitchen where the glass blinked orange at me like a warning? Yes. Do I wish my sons had chosen a different kind of bravery? Every day. But I am here, whole in the ways that matter, and I did not let anyone file down the edges of my life until I fit their idea of safety. If that is revenge, it is the kind that does not rot in your hands. It feeds you. It grows your lilacs. It teaches your granddaughter to play the piano at the place where your house finally belongs to you again.
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.